Star Trek, Voyager's revival really needs to fix its failed villains. When Star Trek, Voyager debuted in 1995, it brought a refreshing twist to the classic Trek formula. A lone Starfleet vessel stranded in the uncharted Delta Quadrant, forced to navigate unknown dangers while trying to return home. It was a concept with built-in stakes, moral dilemmas, and limitless narrative potential. And while Voyager did manage to deliver compelling episodes and a fiercely loyal fanbase, one area where the series repeatedly faltered was in its depiction of villains. With a revival or continuation now feeling more plausible than ever, especially in the age of Star Trek, Picard, Strange New Worlds, and nostalgic reboots, fixing Voyager's failed antagonists should be priority number one. While Captain Janeway, 7 of 9, and the rest of the crew evolved and deepened over 7 seasons, their enemies often remained one-dimensional, repetitive, or simply squandered. A successful Voyager revival must do what the original series never quite managed: give the Delta Quadrant the iconic villains it deserves. The missed opportunity of the Kazon. Voyager wasted no time introducing its first major antagonists, the Kazon. Clearly intended to be the show's answer to the Klingons or Cardassians, the Kazon were a fractured warrior race that controlled large swaths of the Delta Quadrant. But unlike the depth given to Klingon honor culture or Cardassian politics, the Kazon felt undercooked from the beginning. Instead of exploring what made Kazan society tick, or how Janeway's crew could realistically navigate alliances or conflicts with them, the writers leaned on an awkward gang-like dynamic that made them seem less like formidable villains and more like squabbling thugs. Worse, their constant failures and disorganized infighting made it hard to take them seriously. The idea of a fragmented power structure wasn't bad. It mirrored real-world warlords and tribal factions, but the execution was cartoonish. A Voyager revival could reintroduce the Kazon with a complete overhaul. Maybe in the decades since Voyager left the Delta Quadrant, a new Kazon leader has risen, someone with vision and intellect, uniting the sects and holding a grudge against the Federation. This could be a moment to reframe them as a cautionary tale of what happens when an abandoned region of space is left to rebuild without guidance. The forgettable Vidiians. Of all Voyager's villains, the Vidiians might be the most tragic and the most misused. Introduced early in the series, the Vidiians were a highly intelligent species ravaged by the phage, a disease that forced them to harvest organs from other beings to survive. This was body horror in Star Trek, a shocking and original idea. For once, a villain wasn't motivated by conquest or ideology, but survival at the most grotesque cost. And yet, after a handful of episodes, the Vidiians all but vanished. Their complex morality, desperate science clashing with ethics, deserved more exploration. Instead, Voyager pivoted to less nuanced threats, missing a real opportunity to wrestle with questions of medical ethics, empathy, and mercy in the face of extinction. A revival could revisit the Vidiians with new layers. Perhaps they finally cured the phage, but now their society is fractured between those who wish to atone for their past and those who embrace the horror. Maybe ex-Vidiians were their mechanical implants as marks of pride, like post-Borg ideology. The Vidiians could be reborn as a fascinating race wrestling with guilt, shame, and redemption, ready for the kind of rich storytelling modern Trek excels at. Species 8472, From Nightmare to Nuisance. When Species 8472 first appeared in Scorpion, it was genuinely terrifying, an extra-dimensional species immune to Borg assimilation and capable of destroying entire planets. They were Lovecraftian horrors in fluidic space, presenting a threat unlike anything Star Trek had ever seen. But that terror quickly fizzled. Instead of becoming a recurring existential threat, Species 8472 was demystified far too soon. By In the Flesh, the show portrayed them as sympathetic beings misunderstood by humans. While Trek's strength lies in finding empathy, the whiplash in tone made them feel like an afterthought. A Voyager revival could reintroduce the true horror of Species 8472. What if they never stopped watching the Federation? What if their bioships are now upgraded, and they've evolved into something even more alien? In a post-Picard galaxy obsessed with AI and synthetic life, bringing back the primal terror of a purely organic, hyper-evolved threat would be a potent contrast. The Borg, from apex predator to overused tool, few villains in Star Trek history are as iconic as the Borg. So when Voyager began to dip into Borg territory, expectations were high. And to be fair, the early Borg episodes were thrilling. 7 of 9's introduction remains one of the best things the show ever did. But by the later seasons, the Borg became far too familiar. What once inspired dread was reduced to convenience. Borg cubes were dispatched too easily. The Queen, originally mysterious and chilling, was overused to the point of predictability. The solution isn't to ignore the Borg in a revival, but to treat them with the gravity they once commanded. A post-Picard galaxy offers fertile ground to reimagine their presence. Maybe remnants of the Borg collective are reforming, more dangerous and decentralized than ever. Maybe Janeway herself, haunted by her time manipulating the Borg against species 8472, becomes a target of their vengeance. A villain as powerful as the Borg deserves to be rare, terrifying, and used with precision. A Voyager revival should restore that original fear and expand on what a post-Borg identity means for 7 of 9 and others once assimilated. Cesska and the problem of internal villains. Cesska, the duplicitous Maquis-turned-Cardassian operative, was one of Voyager's most promising early villains. She represented everything Voyager's premise was built for: tensions between the Starfleet and Maquis crew, moral ambiguity, betrayal, and survival politics. And yet, she was killed off in Season 3. Cesska's arc should have lasted longer. As a recurring threat who knew Voyager inside and out, she was uniquely equipped to challenge Janeway in ways few others could. Instead of dragging out Kazon battles that no one found compelling, Voyager could have leaned into Cesska's cunning manipulations, maybe even engineering rival factions, exploiting Janeway's ethics, or making contact with far more dangerous alien races. In a revival, Cesska could return in holographic form, AI copy, or flashback, used to inspire a new antagonist who believes Janeway's legacy must be dismantled. A villain who operates from within, rather than brute force from outside, would make for the most gripping drama. The Hierogen, great concept, limited execution. Introduced as spacefaring hunters obsessed with prey, the Hierogen were Voyager's take on Predator-style antagonists. Massive, physically imposing, and steeped in ritualistic obsession with combat, they were genuinely intimidating. But like so many Voyager villains, they never developed past their initial gimmick. Instead of learning more about their culture, hierarchy, or philosophical underpinnings, we got a few action-heavy episodes and a bizarre holodeck arc that squandered their potential. In a revival, the Hierogen could be expanded into a proud, almost Klingon-like culture struggling to evolve beyond war. What happens when your society is based entirely on the hunt and your prey disappears? Maybe a rogue Hierogen warlord blames Voyager for the decline of his people's traditions. Maybe others have integrated into new roles, mercenaries, gladiators, or even diplomats trying to tame their violent instincts. The Hierogen could be more than muscle, they could be tragic. Too many one-offs, not enough legacy. Beyond the main recurring villains, Voyager introduced dozens of one-off antagonists who never reappeared. Some were